Hey there, it's Irene Lyon. Welcome to this video, to this YouTube channel, and to this world of healing trauma, nervous system health, and all things neuroplasticity. I want to get into another kind of common question that I get when my students are going through my neurosensory exercises. Last week, I talked about the drop-in classes that I host and hold, and how when someone is new to this work, they are often surprised by the reaction that they feel from doing some of the more basic practices, such as orienting. And today I want to cover sort of the flip side to what I talked about last week. So last week, and I've posted that below as well, I'll post that at the very end of this video so you can watch that if you missed it. But last week I talked about what it means when we drop into our somatic system, into our environment, and we feel this intense desire to flee, to run, or we might feel extreme panic, terror, and anxiety, and a bracing within the body. So I won't get into that today because I covered that last week. This week, I want to cover the flip side to that, and that is when someone gets into these basic practices and they start to feel this sense of utter boredom, or the desire to check their phone, to distract themselves, to sort of turn off the recording, to just sort of give up, or maybe even they feel nothing and they think that they're doing it wrong. This is also equally common to the flip side, which is to feel intense panic, anxiety, and a desire to flee. And it comes down to, again, our survival strategies that we have in our system to keep ourselves feeling safe. Now, I want to read a passage from a book. This one is Scattered Minds. It is written by one of my favorite authors, medical Dr. Gabor Mate. It's a new look on the origins and healing of attention deficit disorder, that is ADD. Now, we often think of ADD in relationship to kids, but adults, big people like us, we also can be influenced by that, because if we don't heal these early wounds that we know cause ADD, they'll follow us into adulthood. So I want to read this little bit. It's just from page 1, the introduction. So Gabor writes, neuroscience has established that the human brain is not programmed by biological heredity alone, so that's our DNA, that its circuits are shaped by what happens when the infant enters the world, and even while it is in uterus, so in utero. Okay, I did an article a little while ago on the things that we might not think of as traumatic, but are. Post that below as well. In that article, I talk about in utero trauma. I also talk about intergenerational trauma. These are all things that impact us as organisms, as human organisms, in the current time world that we are in now. So even if we didn't have anything bad happen to us now, there are things in the past that it can impact us. So I just wanted to give that kind of caveat. But if we think about this concept, if I go back to the original idea or question, what do I do if I feel bored? I want to distract myself. I don't feel anything, and I'm just not interested in tuning into my body. This can be, and often is, a sign that being in this body of ours is foreign, doesn't feel good, and we just can't drop into it. What I've seen with my students and clients is when they are a little more regulated, a little more curious with their physiology, they can spend a lot of time sensing and feeling and being in their system and enjoying what they are noticing. Of course, how can we enjoy something if all we're feeling is fear and panic and boredom? Obviously, that means that we're not ready for the longer times that we sit in these practices and are in these practices, which means we have to talk about the word titration. So titration is a concept that is from organic chemistry, but Dr. Peter Levine, the founder of somatic experiencing, also known as SE, something I am trained in, he took this word titration from organic chemistry to help us as adults work with building back up our capacity to feel our somatic self, to feel our sensations, to be with the uncomfortable, but also the comfortable. Because sometimes if we even feel things that are big and joyous and we're not used to that kind of activation in our body, that sympathetic activation that can come with not only grief and sadness and fear, but also happiness, joy, exuberance, and just general life goodness, if we're not used to feeling that activation, we can bypass really quickly to wanting to shut it down, to wanting to numb out, to distract because it's just too much. So when we're working at this level of the nervous system and you're engaging in a practice, I should say, like with myself in my programs, in my drop-in classes, etc., or maybe a really good somatic class like a yoga class or a dance class, or maybe even your one-on-one with a somatic therapist, anything where you are actively wanting to tune into your system for the purpose of healing and improving your well-being and the regulation of your system. Whenever we're doing these sorts of things, we have to make sure that we're staying within what we would call a window of tolerance. So in other words, we're not getting to this point where it is so intense that we have to start distracting ourselves with texting or with looking away somewhere else because it's just too intense to be with what we're sensing. Now, what I mean by that is if we are pushing through without being aware that we are pushing through, that's not good. If we sense, let's say you're in a class with me and you're sensing, I'm starting to feel a little bit of something that I don't like, so I'm just going to pick up my phone and look at it. If we can be aware that we are doing that and actively say to ourselves with our higher brain, oh, I'm sensing that I don't like this. I'm going to take a break from listening inside and I am going to look away. I'm going to roll over and take a drink of water from my water bottle. Or, you know what? I am going to check my phone, but I'm going to do it consciously. Or I got to get up and walk around, or I'm going to go to the restroom, or I need a breath of fresh air. Or I have to say to the person I'm working with, can we just pause? I'm feeling a little bit of activation and I don't want to disconnect from myself in the process. That would be a way of titrating into being in our somatic space. It's very different than someone feeling the activation, not even knowing it's there, and then defaulting, bypassing directly into distraction without self-awareness. I hope you see that distinction. So again, to go back to the original question, which a lot of my students will say, like, I'm dropping into this body of mine, I don't know what to do with it, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and so I'm distracting myself. Just notice that that is occurring and know that that's your limit. And it might seem crazy that within the first 5 minutes, or maybe even the first minute, or maybe it's the first 10 seconds, you're sensing that you can't stay with what you're feeling. That might be really frustrating. Like, what's the point if I'm only feeling 10 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes when I've just paid for an hour or I've just paid for all these sessions? That's okay, because that's part of rewiring and learning how to self-regulate the nervous system. It's kind of like a newborn baby. When they come out, we're not going to force it to do all these advanced things right away because they can't, right? It's little tiny bits of connection, and then they might look away because they've had enough. And we have to let them look away, and then when they're ready to come back, we are there to be with them. If we didn't have that early upbringing where we were given that back and forth, that time to rest, that time to pause, and when we were ready to come back, someone was there, that initial wiring is going to be a little wonky. And our ability to sense our bodies is going to be a little wonky because it wasn't laid out in an attuned, healthy, nurtured, and safe way. So if we go back to that quote that I read at the very beginning from Gabor Mate, our genetics are a part of our well-being, but it's our environment, how we were brought into the world. Was it safe? Wasn't it safe? Were we allowed to feel ourselves when we cried? If we if we hurt ourselves, if we were fussy, how were we interacted with? Was it with care and love and connection, or was there abrupt, forceful words? Were we handled in a way that was tense and not safe? When we wanted to cry, were we told to stop? All of these ways that we are dealt with, that we are interacted with when we are young, if we do not actively work on those, it will follow us into our adult years. And then when we go into these situations of learning, whether it's somatic or even more intellectual, a lot of my clients and students who have a past history of early trauma, they know they can't focus. They can't read a book long, one page, and they're off in another land. Maybe they can't get through school. Maybe they struggled in school. Maybe they can't focus on their business or even taking care of their home because their system is so ramped up in survival energy. And so there's a distraction mechanism that comes in because we have to survive to a certain degree. So again, to go back, when we go into these practices, we will find what is lurking in our somatic physiology, and whatever is there is 100% okay. It's how we enter into it that we need to look at. Can we have self-awareness? Can we do some of the basic practices of staying contained in the environment, connecting with the ground under us? If it's too much to see the environment, then maybe we have to get up, walk around, and just feel our hands. If it's too much to feel our hands and connect to this body of ours, maybe we have to look outside into the environment. Or maybe we do have to distract ourselves, but we want to do it consciously. If we can't do it consciously and feel the activation that's making us want to go to distract, it'll be hard to break that cycle. So this was again, short video to talk to my students, and maybe those of you who aren't my students who are struggling with practices that you're doing and you think that you're doing them wrong, you're not sure why you can't connect to your body. And I'm here to say there's a reason for that. What we want to do is we want to learn more about the physiology, more about our autonomic nervous system. Again, that's what I teach and what I work with, and how to titrate our entry point into connecting with our body so our system doesn't shut down, disconnect, and get bored. When we're regulated and connected to this system of ours, it's actually a really beautiful place to be and hang out, but we need to work up to it. We need to build foundations, and then we can really feel ourselves in a whole other way. All right, I hope this video has been useful. Please let me know if it has. Post a comment below, and we will see you next time.